Hey guys, welcome to the Titanium Vault. I'm your host, RJ Bates III. And today I've got a special guest, Matt Porcaro. Matt, how you doing today?
What's going on, man? Glad to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you. So today's episode is called the 203K Way. And I'm excited because I don't know what the hell that means. So you're going to have to teach me everything about these 203K loans. But
Yeah.
before we dive into that, tell everybody where are you coming from and what is it that you do in real estate?
Yeah, man. So I'm based out of New York, right outside of New York City. So that's pretty much what drew me to this loan, was that when I wanted to start getting into real estate, right? I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, classic story, right? Got red pilled by Rich Dad Poor Dad. And, as someone that grew up in a blue collar family, that was like so crazy to me, right? So I went down the rabbit hole, tried a bunch of different strategies. New York, for a lot of different reasons, just a very competitive market. You need a lot of money to play here, a lot of sharks in the water. So I was trying all different strategies and tried and failed at a lot of them. And it wasn't until I found this local real estate investment group, the local RIA, and there's a lady in it that I highly respected. Her name is Melissa, and she actually led the group. And I asked her one day, I'm like, listen, I've been trying to crack this. Like, I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars like some of these other guys in the group, right? You have like guys like me that are like young guys just trying to get scrappy and get into it. And then you have guys that are like trying to get into real estate investing like late in life, right? Like,
Right.
old wealthy guys that want to start buying up turnkey rentals. I'm like, I'm not that guy, right? I'm like, I got maybe 10 grand to my name and I've worked really hard to get that 10 grand in my bank account. Like, what should I do here in New York? And she blew my mind because she told me about this thing called the 203K loan, and I had never heard about it before. But essentially, what it is it's an FHA loan. So if you've heard of FHA loans before, right? I know in the last couple of years, it's kind of been a bad word for people, but we can get into more later on why it's actually not.
Right.
It's almost like the antithesis of a conventional FHA. But an FHA loan, it's an owner occupant loan. So obviously at the time, for me, I was just getting into real estate. I didn't have a house. I didn't own anything. So I knew that I could purchase any property for only 3.5% down. Now, again, I always was thinking 20, 25% down, right? I'm looking at hard money lenders asking for 30%, especially to a newbie. And so that blew my mind. And then the second thing that blew my mind was that it allows you to wrap the renovation budget into the mortgage, right? So when I was thinking about real estate investing for all these years, obviously I'm thinking of all these things and thinking I need a ton of money. Now, 3.5% in my market was even attainable for me. And when you combine those couple of things, you're basically doing like a BRRRR strategy slash house hacking strategy slash, fix and flip strategy, all with such a low down payment.
Right.
And that's really how I got started. And lo and behold, what ended up happening, and we can go more into the details on it, but I was able to pick up a 2-family property. So another great thing about the 203K loan is like other FHA loans, it allows you to buy up to a 4-unit property. So house hacking is big these days, right? Especially with housing costs being like crazy high. Live in one unit, buy a multifamily property, live in one unit, rent out the other units, right? So I learned about that and I was like, oh, this is great. I won't even have to pay for the mortgage for this property.
Right.
So I found a really beat up crack house, literal crack house duplex, the ugliest thing. Because remember, it's still New York. So like even at my price point, like I still couldn't afford shit, right? So I found literally it had human like crap all throughout the house, like raccoons in there. I mean, it was disgusting, right? And I picked it up for 270,000. Needed a full gut reno. It took about 80,000 plus or minus some extra money down at, like later on. So I was all into the loan for 350,000. I only needed to put down 9,500 bucks. I actually put down less than 3.5%. Again, we can get more into that. But I put down the minimum down payment. So that turned into 130,000 in equity in 8 months after doing the renovation. So that was all off of 9,500 bucks. Now to make things cooler was that I was living in one unit, renting out the other unit, and that other unit was pretty much paying for majority of my mortgage. I was kicking in a couple extra $100. And then a year later, which is a year later after closing, which is usually what's recommended, is then you can move out and do whatever. So I actually had just gotten engaged with my now wife and moved out. Now still cash flow that property $2,000 a month net, and that's again all off of that 9,500 bucks. So that ultimately gave me the equity I needed, the experience I needed, the confidence I needed to go finally break into real estate investing, right? I pulled out a home equity line of credit on that equity that I built, and then used that in conjunction with private money, hard money, and started getting into my flipping business. So lo and behold, as you could probably tell, like, you don't know much about it. Nobody talks about this, right?
Right.
So I was like posting in Bigger Pockets and different forums and stuff, and like just getting asked the same questions over and over again. And like having just gone through the process, and I actually started helping friends do it, family members, and they were doing it successfully. And I was like, told my wife one night, I was like, hey, do you think if I started posting about this stuff on Instagram, like people would listen? She's like, yeah, give it a shot. So the 203K way was like the most creative name I'm like the least creative person ever.
Right.
I'm an engineer by trade. I'm like, oh, the 203K way, that's got a ring to it. Because for me, it was like the 203K was the way I got into real estate investing, right? It launched me into the game. And I just started posting about it. And to my surprise, there's a lot of people that just want to hear more about it and learn more about it and learn about the benefits of it. So
all right, a couple of questions.
Yeah.
You have to be an owner occupant, but that means you have to be an owner occupant for 12 months. And after the 12 months, you can move out.
Yeah, exactly. So, the caveat to all of this, right, is the reason they're giving you such a low down payment and such a low out of pocket, and such a low, like, obviously you're going to pay like a homeowner occupied interest rate. So like prime interest rate.
Right.
Is that this isn't like a flipping loan, right? This isn't a loan that's meant to be used over and over and over again. So really where this works best for people is people that are currently renting, don't have a primary or something like that, and they want to go and buy something else, right? Or they want to go and buy and like kind of use this as leverage to really start their career. You're right. Like I'm sitting in my forever home now that I'm doing an actual renovation on. I actually didn't pick this wood paneling. Like this isn't what I want, right? This is my makeshift office. We're starting our renovation soon with another renovation loan. I practice what I preach. That's for our now primary forever home. We're going to renovate it the way we like. And we can talk more about that. But, this thing isn't meant to be, it's basically the way I talk to people about it is it's the means to the end, right? It's getting you a cash flowing cash cow property that you can take, you put so little down and you take and go buy more. Yeah. So the idea here is, so you are an owner occupant. The FHA rule is that you need to make it your primary, right? Obviously people will try to get in the gray area of this, like not live in the property and all those things. I don't condone any of that. At the end of the day, if you're just starting out, like, who gives a shit? Live in the property for a year, live in it briefly, get that under your belt. Again, you can house hack, live pretty much for free, right? If you're renting right now, you're throwing that money away. You could live in a property, build equity in that property, completely get rid of your living expense, right? Like I have people in my group, in my community and stuff, and they get into a 2-family or a 3-family, they were previously paying $2,000 a month in rent. Now they're not paying anything. So what does that mean? That means they're getting an extra $20,000, $25,000 a year in their pocket. Now that's more money that you can use to go put more down payments on properties to buy more rentals, right?
Absolutely.
So you're getting net cash flow in your pocket. So you don't need to live in it. Like after that year, that's like the statute of limitations. But again, the idea here is you're not repeating it over and over and over again. You're doing it to like establish yourself, opening a lot of doors, and then continuing with real estate investing.
Gotcha. So I know one location, one market that I know that this would be brilliant to do is Anchorage, Alaska.
Oh, wow.
We've done several flips up there, and the market itself has just a ton of triplex and quadplexes up there.
Oh, really?
And
no kidding.
And so in that case, what you're talking about, I mean, you're talking about what you were able to do with a duplex. Cash flow wise, but imagine if you did that to a quadplex, to be able to go in there and the amount of cash flow that you're coming out immediately. And like you said, it's to establish your foundation as a real estate investor. And now you're moving forward with, in your case, you have 2,000. If you did it up there, you could have somewhere of like $6,000 a month in net cash flow to get started.
Easy.
I mean, that's beautiful because, again, high rent rates up there as well, similar to what you have in New York. Okay, on the rehab, are they escrowing that rehab and then releasing it to you just like a hard money loan after the work is completed?
It's very, very similar to hard money, but the best way to explain it, right? So the way the process works is this, all right? And this is where a lot of people get this wrong, like myself included. So there is a correct way to do this. Obviously, that's why this is part of what I explain and everything like that. So the way that it works is you're going to be looking for a property, right? Now, again, you do it my way. You're analyzing deals such that you're an investor, right? You're looking to build 20, 30% equity on the deal. You're looking to make sure that it cash flows, 1% rule, whatever, right? So you're looking for properties. You get it at a price that you're obviously estimating renovation costs roughly. You don't need to be like a guru with knowing renovation costs. There's a lot of things that we put into there to help you with that. Rough price per square footage to get a rough idea on what your renovation costs are going to be. And you use that to place your offers. Okay. Once you get into contract, once you place an offer, you get into contract. The first person that should go in there with you is someone called a 203K consultant. Now, a 203K consultant is they're certified by HUD, but basically they're essentially inspectors, like home inspectors that add the 203K consultant feather in their hat. Like anything else, there's good ones and there's bad ones. The good ones are the ones that actually understand renovation costs in your market. Because what they're going to help you do is they're going to help you create a scope of work. Just like with hard money, you have to usually submit a scope of work. Now, with the 203K loan, obviously it's a little more detailed, right? The biggest complaint with people love to say like, oh, the 203K is too much paperwork. Okay, think about how much leverage the bank is giving you. The bank is giving you, believe it or not, with a 203K, you're actually able to get a loan for 110% of the after renovated value. So think about how insane that is, right? And all you need to give them in trade of that is 3.5%. So like, yes, they do want a detailed scope of work. Now, my background's in construction, and like the reason most people fail with contractors and get screwed by contractors is because they walk into it without a detailed scope of work. They don't vet these guys. They don't do the work that the bank's helping you do. Yes, they should be insured. Yes, they should be licensed. Yes, they should have trade lines. Right? They should be able to mobilize their guys on the job without a deposit. They can give you a deposit, but they want to make sure you can do it without, because they want to make sure you're cash positive. Anyway, so that 203K consultant is going to help you build out that scope of work. Once that scope of work is put together, they also will give you a rough order of magnitude of what the pricing should be. It's very, very unbiased. That's the whole point of it. It's not exact, but from there, you have that scope of work. Now you shop it out to contractors, right? You might have contractors in mind. I'm a big believer. I'm in the construction background. 3 to 5 bids on every project. That's just the way you should do it all the time. Even I have my contractors that I work with. I have subs. I still get outside numbers. I always want to keep my subs, accountable and make sure that their numbers are still staying in line with the market. So you shop that out. Then once you pick a contractor that you like, that contractor's estimate then gets built into that scope of work with their values, right? They're just looking time and material on each one, right? Each line item, right? Kitchen, $1,000, tile, 500, whatever, all down the line. And then what happens is the bank takes that and adds it to the loan amount plus a 10% contingency. It's automatically added. So they build that into the deal again. And then at closing, exactly your point. At closing, the seller gets paid whatever the seller's purchase price is, and then that remaining money goes into an escrow account. Now, that 203K consultant still stays on board. They're basically like a draw specialist. Same way, again, with hard money, someone comes out, just verifies what's been done, and then they release the funds based on that draw schedule. So again, the way construction is done, like people love to be like, oh, no contractor wants to work with 203Ks. Yeah, the wrong ones don't want to work with 203Ks. Like guys that understand, have ever done insurance work, have ever done like bigger scale renovation or construction work, commercial work. Like this is how the game is played. Yeah. Like you get paid on milestones, right? Like you have to mobilize without a deposit. There's a lot of things in these fail safes that are put in place to make sure the renovation process goes well. So it's a great question, but I use that because I think this is where so many people mess up, right? Is not having the right process in which to do it.
And it's funny because this is there to protect you as the borrower. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because, I'm guilty of it. I mean, we complain about the fact that it's like, yeah, there's paperwork and sometimes it's slow to get your draw. But to your point, if you have a good 203K consultant, I bet you there's the good ones are quicker to get out there, check the work, and get your money released, right?
Yeah, again, it all comes down to working with where most people screw this up again also like is they just work with people that don't know this process. So
Right.
there's a lot of lenders out there. This is part of my story. My lender happened to be a family friend. I asked him about the 203K. He's a hot talking New Yorker guy. He's like, yeah, let's do it, man. This is going to be perfect for you. Blah, 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 blah. We get into it. I realized very quickly him nor anybody in his entire fucking office had any idea what a 203K was. Right.
Yeah.
So like, it made everything really difficult. Now, it doesn't need to be difficult. Me and my wife just closed on our own house with a renovation home style loan. Exact same process, just Fannie Mae's version of a reno loan. It's better for single family. We closed in 44 days. So, yeah, it's not when you know what the process is, it's worth it. But where a lot of people screw up is they work with lenders that don't understand it, even 203K consultants that aren't very experienced with it, and they're too slow on getting their draws out and everything like that. On my projects that I've done, the draws, the inspection, the HUD consultant comes out, they do the inspection. The next day, they're sending the paperwork to the bank. The bank usually overnights the check or does like a 2-day, like FedEx, like over, very fast checks. Now, again, these are the good banks that understand the process and they understand the value of getting the money out quickly. So, having the right team is probably one of the most important parts of this process.
So, I mean, listen, when you break this down, what this is going to force you to do is hire a contractor that understands this process and is also in a cash flow position where when they complete work, they're not needing their money immediately, which means they're probably a really good contractor. I mean, so again, it's just forcing you to be successful at the end of this. I mean, that's what the bank is essentially doing, is saying, hey, we're going to make sure you don't screw this up. So it's all there to support you along the way. Now, you talked about that this is supposed to be a kind of a one-time thing. Are you allowed to do it multiple times, or is it really only supposed to be done once?
Number one question I get asked is how many times can you do it? Because people hear this and they're like, oh shit, this would be great if I only have to put down 3.5% every time. Again, the idea is that this shouldn't be repeated. Can it be repeated? Sure. The big caveat with it is generally that they don't want to see you go up in units. So the whole idea is that it doesn't make sense to a bank or an underwriter. This is why, like, usually you don't want to have, you don't want to already own your own property and be in a primary residence. Because the idea, especially if you want to buy multifamily. Now, single family is a different story. We could do that all day, every day with the Fannie Mae's version of the loan. But with a 203K, 203K really shines with multifamily. That's really where that works. If you're only looking to do like a live and flip, like fix and flip for your primary and build equity into your primary, home style all day, every day, and it has a little easier limitations. But on the 203K, they don't want to see you like living in a nice house in the suburbs, and then you're trying to convince them that you're going to go be an owner occupant in a quadplex next to a train station, right? Like that doesn't make any, especially if it's nearby. Now it's a different story. There's like the 100-mile rule or the 150-mile rule of like, if you're changing areas because of work, if you're doing something like that, then they allow you to go into that next property and do the other thing. Now, the big thing, the big limiting factor and why it gets a little trickier for people to repeat is, number one, the exiting property that you're leaving needs to have an existing lease in place, number one. Number two, it also needs to have 25% equity in it from that previous location. And then it needs to be a certain distance away if you're planning to keep that previous property. So that's where the sticky point gets. Also, you need to get, obviously they're gonna qualify your previous lease, and they're gonna look at that and make sure, obviously your debt to income ratio will help you. But for single families, yes. But if you actually really wanted to do this, there's a strategy out there. They call it the 4-3-2-1. They do it with like FHA, with the house hacking community. You start with a 4-unit, go to a 3-unit, 2-unit, 1-unit.
Right.
I've personally never seen anybody do it successfully. Again, if you really, this better than anybody. real estate loves speed. Money loves speed. To me, it's way too slow. There's nobody out there that loves the 203K more than me. But the whole thing that I try to tell people is like, listen, this is going to open so many doors for you. Kind of like you said before, it's teaching you good habits. It's teaching you good experience, great skill sets. It's like flipping a house with training wheels on, right?
Absolutely.
Doing a burst strategy with training wheels on, right?
That's what I was going to say. Okay, so if you do this on your first one and you essentially house hack or whatever with a triplex, okay, whatever you do, the next time you go do a deal, don't decide, okay, well, I'm going to pay my contractor immediately when they're done without getting an inspection, or break all these habits that you are creating on this first one, because there's a reason why these are in place. I have a question though. Once you're done, does it require a refinance, or does it automatically just roll into, because the loan was already at that rate and it already included your rehab, so you're just done? It doesn't require a refinance.
Doesn't require a refinance, but I usually preach to do, especially if you're doing the 203K. The 203K FHA has PMI, mortgage insurance, because it's a low down payment, right? So anybody listening, mortgage insurance is basically your ticket, your fee you pay to be in the subprime borrower club, right? Because you're paying less than 20% down, you're a higher risk borrower. So in turn, they make you pay something called PMI, mortgage insurance. Basically, the way to think about it is there's a big bucket of every person that has an FHA loan on their house, and they all have a percentage. It actually got lowered to 0.5% of your monthly loan balance, amortized over the year, each year. So it's usually a couple $100, $200, $300, nice chunk of change, right? Especially if you're looking to cash flow it. And that couple $100 goes into a big bucket. So that's where banks, because listen, the government's not giving you the loan on this, right? The government just makes the guidelines. The banks actually give you the loan. So the bank's incentive to do these loans are, number one, they get a higher fee. So that's a good thing for them. Number two is they know if any of these loans default, they're insured by this FHA mortgage insurance program. So all the money that people pay in mortgage insurance every month from an FHA cover the back end. So what does this all mean, and why is this important? Typical FHA loans, you don't build any equity into the deal, and you're stuck with this mortgage insurance forever. You can't refi, you kind of like stuck with it, right? That's why I tell people to build at least 20%, 30% equity into the deal. That's the whole point of the 203K. If you're not forcing equity, right, into the property, then there's kind of no point to do a renovation loan. The idea and the beauty of this is that you can force that money in kind of 10, in my case, 10x your down payment or more, 15x your down payment amount, refinance into conventional, or do a cash out refi, or do a home equity line of credit where you can pull out way more than you put in and go and repeat the process. Now, when you're doing this, when you're refinancing, you might as well refinance into a conventional, get rid of that mortgage insurance, because now you have enough equity on the deal. And then once you have that, you're getting, slightly better rates. Obviously, it boosted my cash flow on my property an extra like $250, $300 a month, which is great because I knew I was going to hold it as a rental long term.
So on that note, you talked about if you were to move to a new location and want to do a second 203K, you have to have a minimum of 25% equity. But no matter what, with the way that we are buying deals, you should always have a minimum of that when you're completing the project. I mean, so again, it's creating good habits across the board. And you even want that in this case when you're doing your refi, because you want to make sure that you're at least having that 25, 30% equity there to be able to make sure everything is getting paid off with the refinance as well.
Exactly.
So again, all good standards that this loan is teaching you to get started. Now, you've done the 203K. In your case, like you said, 15x, your down payment. So now what are you wanting to roll into? Are you now going to start using hard money loans to start doing flips, or what is the next step in the process?
Yeah, so I jumped right into flipping. So my background's in construction. So we started flipping houses in my market. Nothing crazy, 1 or 2 a year. And then the pandemic hit and I got exposed big time, because what happened was I realized that my only deal source is why I love you, because I learned about off market, right? About how to really do off market and really find deals. I was completely dependent on foreclosures. Like foreclosures was also big here. So, I tell people all that, like, full transparency, like I didn't know shit about off market. Right. And I got exposed very quickly because so it was March 15th, 2020. I had two deals that were trying to go to contract local to my market. March 15th, 2020. Everyone remembers that, right? Everything shut down. There was not a single person in the world that would lend to me for these deals because I was just in that window, and these banks were still being like, listen, banks are not easy to deal with, right? Like foreclosures are not easy. People love to say like, oh, you bought this deal back in 2016. It was so much easier. No, it was never easy. Like every market has its own issue, right? So these banks were super, super cutthroat, and they were just, I'm like, listen, give me some time. Obviously, everything's crazy right now. Like, give me some, nope. The banks ended up holding on to them. It was the right decision on all of their parts because they ended up making a killing on those two deals. It makes me sick looking at them. I just couldn't find anybody to give me money on that. So I lost those two deals. And then what ended up happening was I kind of tried to get back into the mix, and obviously foreclosures evaporated. Inventory across the board evaporated, but especially foreclosures. And the problem with foreclosures was that none of the court cases or anything were happening, right? So like so personally, I was doing my flipping, completely got exposed there at another rental property, but that was it. And I was like, oh shit, okay. Now around that time is when I started. Obviously, there was a lot of time at home. Also, me being in New York City, there was not a lot of things to do. I started going all in on the 203K way and just making content, right? Because I was sticking at home. And this is when the 203K way kind of really took off, because I think at that time, a lot of people were looking for different, strategies, and people were home and had time to learn about real estate investing. And, and that's when this whole thing took off. I'm actually back in the game, looking now out of state, because with everything that happened with New York is just really brutal. You know what I mean? Like, I saw a lot of flippers lose their shirts in the last couple months. I was always very conservative. You have a lot of guys around here with big wallets, and they just were like willing to make 5% on the deal. I can't compete with that. And I could compete with that. I just don't want to compete with that. Right. So, for me, the pivot has gone now off market, doing like I actually found my own house off market. That was like kind of my foray into really understanding off market and really using that as a tool, because there's still no foreclosures. Like they're so backed up on that.
Well, I was going to ask you, don't foreclosures take forever in New York anyways?
Oh yeah. That's the other thing too, brother. Like, it was like, we had a big backlog from between, it was, obviously 2008, and then Hurricane Sandy hit New York, Long Island specifically, like big time. So between those two things, there was a lot of like zombie homes for a long time. Now, again, none of them were like, these weren't deals. Like these weren't like, the banks were still way overpriced. They were impossible to deal with. They make you put 10% earnest money. And if you don't want to back out of it, like to even offer on the property, you needed to put money up. And if you backed out, they would take your earnest money. Like, so cutthroat, like it's like borderline illegal what they were doing. But they knew that they could. But what I want to mention is, here's a secret with the people that I work with and people that I've taught and do this thing. And this is something that actually kind of worked for me too. I tell people all the time, right? And it makes more sense to people that are beginning. You're going to use this to create 10, 15x on your down payment, right? You're going to create a lot of equity that everyone's like, oh, great, I'm going to cash out, refi, go buy more deals. I'm going to go get a home equity line of credit. 90% of people that I've worked with that have finished their deals and on to the next, and deal number 2, number 3, number 4, don't use any of that equity, because of just what we've been saying. The whole theme of this is like, they learn the game. All of a sudden, hard money lenders, private money lenders would never talk to them. All they did was get one deal under their belt and promote it to other lenders in their market. And all of a sudden, everyone wants to invest with them. I think that was the one thing that I was so surprised about with real estate, was that there's just such a gap between your no deals and your first deal. Yeah. Like, the barrier of entry is just like this giant cliff, and it's like you crawl up that cliff, and you're like, people are falling by, like dying on the ground, and you're, holy shit, and like you're climbing up this thing to get your first deal done, and then you get to the top, and it's just like, it's like the Grand Canyon. It's just like a clearing, and it's like you get to that point, and you like, it's almost like you become like you're part of this club now, and you're like, oh, now it doesn't get any easier. It just kind of like, it just opens so many more doors for you, and you become like, okay, this is a different set of tools, right? I like make the analogy like the 203K loan is like your like rappel to get up that cliff, right? Like you're tossing the thing up. It's helping you get up that cliff. It's making it a little more attainable for when you're starting out. Boom, then you're on the cliff. Now you don't really need that rappel anymore because everything's pretty flat. Now you need a new tool, which is like a bike or a horse or something to get you across that land. And it's like, okay, those are different tools. They're faster tools, right? But they're different tools that are going to get you down, down your path or wherever you want to go. So all the people that I like, they end up just raising private capital. I have a guy in my group, TJ, in my community, and like, dude, he's on unit, I don't know, he's on like 28 units. He's on a hot tear right now. And immediately after, he built a relationship with his real estate agents. A 6 unit came up like right around the corner from where he was looking. He made connections with private money lenders and hard money lenders just through like local thing. He was showing them the deal that he did successfully. He got a great deal, built like $100,000 equity, $1,200 a month cash flow. And they gave him 100% financing on this deal, on the 6 unit. Every deal he's bought since has either been 100% financing, subject to seller financing. Like he broke that barrier with getting the first one. And again, it's like, you don't need to tap that equity. It's hard to convince people that have never done real estate that money's not the problem.
Right.
Like once you get some deals under your belt, you realize like I can make a phone call right now and raise $1 million. Like it does, if I have the right deal, it's not as difficult. Now, obviously it comes later and it comes over time, but it's hard to convince people that are new that money is kind of not as hard as you think it is once you have some experience.
Well, the other thing is that equity is what you earned, and it's what the bank in the future wants to see. They want to see, hey, you went out, you purchased this property, you rehabbed it, and then you refinanced it, and you're at 60% of value. You've got 40% equity, so I know that you're a good borrower, so I'm willing to do a cash out refi on you on your second unit, your second unit, whatever it is. That is, but it's also, it's not there to be tapped into. The whole point in these is to generate cash flow.
Bingo.
That's the beauty of what you're talking about here is you're making $24,000 a year off of that, and then you have the equity as well, and then you go duplicate that, and then you're building up that residual income that's coming in, and then you can say that's how it's so easy to become a millionaire with real estate, because you could be a millionaire on paper and you could say, there it is right there, there's all of the equity, I could go cash that in, sell these, and have $1 million cash. But you don't want the $1 million cash, you want the $1 million equity.
This is a perfect thing. And there's another guy in my group. His name's Tim. He bought a 3-family just north of New York City. All right. He bought it so it was listed for like $970,000. He bought it for $840. He got him down to $840. Seller covered closing costs. So all he put out of now it was also like $170,000 renovation, let's call it. So he's about all in for like $1 million or just shy of $1 million. His down payment on that was $35,000.
Right.
So he has $35,000 to control a $1 million asset, which now, albeit, is going to be renting out $4,000 a month net, because he's going to Airbnb one of the units, which it's right outside of New York City. He's going to get like some crazy number for that, and then the other 2 is gonna be long term. He's already since planned to move out. He's a firefighter, New York City firefighter, retired, headed down to Florida. So now he's got this thing. It's locked up. It's been over a year. His next door neighbor offered him 1.3 cash for the property as is. Now, again, it's the kind of like, one in the hand versus two in the bush.
Right.
It's like he has options, but like at the end of the day, $4,000 a month cash flow, like there's no reason to give that up. But he knows that he's sitting on $300,000 of equity today. And then the other thing I love to tell him is like, you are a guaranteed millionaire.
Yep.
You're guaranteed a millionaire because in 30 years from now, you will have at least one paid off 1 million, assuming no appreciation in New York in 30 years, which obviously there will be. In 30 years, you're going to have at least a $1.3 million asset completely free and clear. You're a millionaire, guaranteed. And that's the first property. He's gone on and done others. But when you think about all of that from 35 grand, like
Exactly.
it's when the translation is so cool. And that's the power of leverage. When you really use leverage, like you get to see those types of numbers and it just like, it blows your mind, right? It doesn't include tax benefits, all the fun stuff, right?
I love it, man. Well, I have to say, very informative on what a 203K loan is. It's pretty cool because I wish I would have known about this early on, and I'm pretty sure that's why the 203K ways exist, right? So you could teach people this because looking back at it, obviously I've kind of eclipsed the point in which I can do this, but this is why we have the podcast is to teach people like, hey, if you're trying to figure out how to get your first deal under your belt, here's a great way for you to go do it and come out of it with what you're saying, equity and cash flow, which is what we're after. So I love it, man. How can people learn more about you and also the 203K way?
Yeah, man. So Instagram is really like where I started this whole thing. So at the 203K way is just my handle. As you probably know, there was like those imposters for a while. I'm sure you had some of them for you, right? They're like, it's like at the 203K way, or like I had one, it was like WEY. It's like,
oh wow,
the way. But yeah, like I paid, yes, no judgment. I paid for the blue check because I was getting ridiculous. I love people who are like, oh, you just pay for it. Yeah, I do, because my followers were getting harassed.
Right.
And obviously, it's not easy to get these blue checks. Like you got to have all this, press and media. I didn't have that. So anyway, look for the blue check. That's actually me. There's a lot of other guys out there with the correct spelling. I post a lot on there. My YouTube channel is something that I'm building, slowly but surely. A lot of good, like longer form content on there. You can check out the YouTube channel. But really, I mean, those are the two main places. I have a website too, but there's not much on there. Facebook group as well. Again, if you look up the 203K way on any of the platforms, you'll find me.
Awesome. I'll make sure to put those links in the show notes.
Sure.
Thank you for coming on the show, man. I appreciate it. Another cool thing about doing the podcast is you got referred to me by Justin Colby because he was the guest on the show. This is what I love about this community, because Justin's like, dude, Matt needs to come on your show. He needs to teach your audience about what he's doing. It's really awesome. So I love the community that we have here in real estate, where we share things like this. And like I said, man, 200 plus episodes. I've never had anybody talk about the 203K. So you can hold that badge of honor. There's your feather in your cap right there. You're the only guy on the titaniumvault that's ever talked about it. So, all right, guys, that's today's episode. Again, remember, leave us a 5-star review if you enjoyed today's episode. Matt, thanks so much for coming on.
RJ, you're the man. Thanks for having me.